Hi guys, and welcome to the next video on my channel. Now this topic is a particularly hard one to cover. It's quite hard hitting, but I think it's so important to talk about because it involves domestic abuse, and especially against a young person. I think that the more we talk about it, the less of a taboo it will be to talk about domestic abuse. This case was originally on Britain's Darkest Taboos, a documentary which was on Netflix, but it's now been taken off, so I got most of my information from that and then pieced up different bits of information from different articles I read online. This involves a tragic case of a 6-month-old baby being killed by her own father. On the 13th of December 1994, Kim holds her newborn baby daughter in her arms, Kaylee. Now, Gwyneth Swain, which is Kaylee's grandmother, said that Kaylee was the first girl in the family and she was a joy. Kim had already lost 2 young boys as infants, and her other son, Sean, was severely disabled and required around-the-clock care. And Kim had always wanted a little girl, so the whole family doted on her. And right from the offset, Kim and Kaylee had a really strong motherly bond. They loved each other, they loved spending time with each other, they respected each other, and Kim was Kaylee's idol. They were like sisters, and Kaylee would quite often par off her friends to just hang out with her mum in their house. Kaylee was, however, quite shy, very self-conscious, and she really didn't like the way that she looked. Sean eventually moves in with Grandma Gwyneth so that he can have the 24-hour care that he needs, but Kim still stays in regular contact and still keeps a really good relationship with her son. When she was 15, Kaylee became like any other 15-year-old girl and she really wanted a boyfriend. However, she felt so self-conscious that she made fake dating profiles lying about her age behind her mum's back. And then she was introduced through a mutual friend to Carl Mills on Facebook, and the two began chatting. Carl Mills was 25, so 10 years older than Kaylee, and he had a very dysfunctional lifestyle. He was homeless, he was an alcoholic, he'd not held down a job for very long, and he had very negative relationships with all his family members. In fact, when he was 18, he set fire to his mum's own bed. Luckily, no one was hurt or killed, but he tried to kill his own mum. His mum, however, refused to press charges against her son. Kaylee's grandma said that although Kaylee had the body of a 15-year-old girl, she had the mind of a 10, 11 or 12-year-old child. She was very young and naive, and police believe this is why Carl's targeted her. He knew that she would be easy to manipulate, and so he began the grooming process, and they were talking online for months. And then eventually Carl travelled down to Cwmbran in Wales and waited outside the school gates for Kaylee, which is just so weird. He must have known her age, he must have known that she was 15. And he was waiting outside the school gates for her, and rumours started to spread that this man was Kaylee's boyfriend. Now, not long after this, police go to the home that Kaylee shares with Mum Kim and stepdad Di. And they get a shock. The police come in and they confiscate Kaylee's phone and laptop for investigation. And when they return it, they inform Kim that her daughter is in fact in a relationship with 25-year-old Carl Mills. Kim's absolutely distraught. She wants to protect her daughter, and so she takes Kaylee's phone and Kaylee's laptop off her. However, this is where the relationship starts to break down. There's a shift from it being a really strong mother and daughter relationship to it being Kaylee and Carl. And she gets another phone behind her mum's back with a SIM card so she can still stay in contact with Carl. After almost a year of grooming in the summer of 2011, Carl begins to visit more often, and then Kaylee becomes 16 and the relationship quickly turns sexual. At this point, Kaylee is absolutely besotted with Carl, but Carl doesn't trust her. He accuses her of cheating, and he also abuses her in the street. He moves down to Cwmbran and lives under the bridge at the train station in a tent. He sleeps rough, and he starts to abuse Kaylee in the street. He calls her fat, he calls her ugly, and he screams abuse at her in front of strangers in the street. And this is where a lot of people would start to say, well, why didn't she leave him if he was insulting her and belittling her? But people don't realise how easy, especially someone with low confidence and as naive as Kaylee was, this was her first love, her first boyfriend, how much hold someone can have over you. It's easy to break someone down, especially, like I said, if they have low confidence. He probably broke Kaylee down to the point that she felt that she wasn't good enough for anybody else. And she wanted this to work. She loved him. After this, Kaylee becomes a very different girl to the one that her family knew previously. She doesn't listen, she doesn't respect her family members, she starts staying out later and longer just to keep Carl happy, and even sleeps rough with him on the streets some nights. And then Kim gets the news that she was dreading to hear. Kaylee is pregnant. Kaylee had been sleeping rough on the streets at this point for 2 nights. Police said this is what Carl would have wanted. He wanted Kaylee to be pregnant, he'd get a house with benefits, and he'd have even more control over his family. However, Kim doesn't want Kaylee sleeping on the streets, and so she reluctantly agrees to let Carl come and stay in the house while Kaylee comes home while she's pregnant. Suddenly, the 100% of the tension wasn't on Carl. It was on the newborn baby, her family, and he starts to get extremely jealous, and the abuse just worsens. He calls her a slut and a whore, he constantly accuses her of cheating, and then when he argues, he sends her threatening texts threatening to stab her and stab her family members. And on one occasion, he even punched Kaylee in the head. Kim wants Kaylee to leave him. Kaylee deep down knows that she should leave him, but this is the father of an unborn child. She wants to make it work. She's always dreamed of a fairy tale family relationship. And although she knows it's the right thing to do, she's young and she's naive, and she still stays with Carl. Kaylee finds she's expecting twins, and in March 2012, she's rushed to the hospital, and her 2 daughters are born 15 weeks premature. Unfortunately, Angel is born stillborn, and Kimberly is fighting for her life in intensive care not long afterwards. Now, Carl shows no emotion. He doesn't act like he's just lost a child and one of his other daughters is fighting for her life. Gwyneth says that Kimberly was deaf, she was blind, she had a hole in her heart, she had 2 bleeds on the brain, and she struggled to feed, and she was in intensive care for 6 months in the end. Carl reluctantly visits. He doesn't visit very often, and when he does, he abuses Kaylee. He tells Kaylee that it's her fault that Angel died, she murdered his favourite daughter, and really messed with her head. He stops visiting for a while and then visits again, but only to ask Kaylee for sex, and the 2 engage in inappropriate sexual content at the hospital, and Carl is banned from visiting. Now, when Kaylee's eventually released, she goes back to Carl, and Carl gets into her head. He discourages Kaylee from seeing her daughter, and so she stops going to visit her daughter in the hospital. Kim steps in as Kimberly's primary carer, and she goes to the hospital to look after Kimberly. And Carl persuades Kaylee that she's not fit to be a mother and that her mum should bring up her daughter. And so Kaylee begs her mum, please, I just want to be the sister. Please let me be the sister and you be the mum. And Kim says, no, I want to be a grandma. Eventually, Kim persuades Kaylee to take a weekend course at the hospital to learn how to look after her baby daughter. And she reluctantly lets Mills stay in the house. Now, I don't know why she let him stay in the house. I'm assuming it's because Kaylee refused to do the hospital course unless Carl had somewhere to stay, but I don't know, I'm just speculating. But Carl shows a complete lack of respect. He cuts all the electric, the TVs and the lights, he lets the dog poo everywhere, and he completely trashes the bedrooms. And Kaylee's stepdad dies, tells Kim that she should report it to the police. He's committed criminal damage, and so she does. But Kaylee is absolutely furious with her mother for reporting it to the police because social services say that Carl is not allowed near his baby daughter. Carl is angry that he has to sleep rough again, And Kaylee is really angry at her mum for reporting Carl to the police, and so she begins to sleep rough again. Now, Kim agrees to become Kimberly's primary carer so that Kimberly didn't get taken off them, and a care package is put in place which involves Kaylee coming home. So Kaylee comes home and Mills begins to live in a tent in the front garden of the house, and he just gets angrier and angrier and angrier. He sends abusive texts, he threatens to burn the house down, he threatens to stab her, he threatens to dig up the 2 infant boys who Kim lost and stamp on their heads, he threatens to dig up Angel. Friends of Kim confront him and he threatens them as well. He's a very, very violent man. On the 16th of September 2012, Kaylee's daughter is allowed to come home. And suddenly there's a shift in Kaylee. Her daughter becomes her number 1 priority as soon as that baby goes through the front door. And Gwyneth comments on how they were like a little family. She went round, Kaylee was nursing her daughter and looking after her, and they all just looked so happy. And the last thing she said to them was, "I'm going to leave you to it, ring me if you need anything." And that night, Di goes back to his flat. He usually stays in the house, but he goes back to the flat because he wants to leave the girls to it. He wants them to have their first night together as a trio. And family members began to call them the Special Ks. They were welcomed back by the community. Banners were put up saying "Welcome home." That night, Mills becomes incredibly jealous and angry. He thinks there's another man in the house with Kaylee acting as Kimberly's dad. He constantly texts Kaylee abusive texts saying, "You better bring that man out or else I'll burn the house down." At 11 p.m, he sends a series of sarcastic texts and rips down the "Welcome home" banner outside. Now, at 1 a.m, he sets fire to his tent outside of the house, and he texts Kaylee to say, "Look, this is what I will do to your house next." And I don't know whether she ignored him or whether she was asleep, but he didn't get a response. And so at 3 a.m, when he didn't get a response, he was absolutely furious. A neighbour, Steve Jones, wakes up and sees thick black smoke coming from Kim's house. And he and 2 of the neighbours run over to try and open the door, but as they do, the windows burst through. And as much as they tried, there was nothing they could do to save these 3 family members. The neighbour, Steve, says that Mills walks past the house smirking and laughing and makes no attempts to try and rescue his family. He later lied and told police that he did try to rescue his family. Kaylee is stood at her window screaming for her mother. She's holding her baby Kimberly in her arms, and Kim screams, "I can't get to you, I'm on fire." Kaylee is stood at the window screaming for her mother, holding her daughter Kimberly in her arms. And Kim replies, "I can't get to you, I'm on fire." Kaylee then begins to scream uncontrollably. At 3:30, the emergency services arrive. And by 3:45, Gwyneth has been alerted and she gets dressed and runs down to the house. And then Di finds out, and friends and family and the whole community are absolutely devastated. Mills is quickly arrested. He shows little emotion. He doesn't act like he's just lost a girlfriend, a daughter and a mother-in-law, but he tries to play the caring boyfriend. He says there was no problems in his and Kaylee's relationship, that they were planning on getting married, and that he did try and rescue Kaylee and Kimberly from the fire. However, not long after, police retrieve Kaylee's phone from the fire and see the threatening texts that Carl sent to Kaylee, and he tries passing this off as empty threats. However, after this, he refuses to answer any more questions and replies no comment to every question he's asked. Police said he just couldn't keep up this fake profile. He could no longer pretend to be the caring boyfriend, and he's charged with 3 counts of murder, and his trial is set for July 2013. Now in court, he is grinning, he's laughing, he shows no emotion or no remorse at all. Police said that they had to prove that the fire wasn't started accidentally by the tent fire that Mills had started earlier on. A photo taken by 3 a.m. by a neighbour shows the tent burnt out and the house not on fire, which proves that the tent fire happened way before the house fire started. Police said that Carl got a match or a lighter and set fire to a recycling box and put it in the porch at the bottom of the stairs. This quickly spread straight up to the second floor, and a gas pipe melted and acted like a flamethrower. Police said that he would have known that this is what would have happened. He knew the layout of the house. He knew if he started the fire in the place that he started it, then they wouldn't be able to get to each other and they wouldn't be able to escape. He knew what he was doing. He then tried powering off the fire on Kaylee, saying that she started it with a discarded cigarette butt. On the 18th of July 2013, Mills is found guilty and the judge calls him despicable. After a parole hearing, he's sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 35 years, although the judge says there's no guarantee he will ever be released from prison. In 2015, it was found in a review that the murders could have been prevented if Gwen police had checked the killer's background after initial complaints had been made. Kaylee's mum made a complaint, her teachers made a complaint, and eventually hospital staff. And the domestic homicide review found, amongst other things, that no attempts were made to prevent the abuse, no inquiries with agencies in Bolton's, and proper policies and procedures that were in place were not followed adequately. There was a lot more stuff in this report. I will put a link to it in the description box below. So that's it for today's case. Like I said, I think these cases are so important to talk about because domestic abuse can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. It's so easy to be manipulated, but it's also easy to think that if you were in the situation, you get out of it. I think it's important to talk about the signs and the causes and know that there's a lot more that can be done to help compared to 2012. I think to now, Clare's Law will be in place soon and people can check the past convictions of their new partner to see whether they've been convicted of domestic abuse in the past. This has been a really, really sad case that could have been prevented. Thank you for watching. I know it's been quite a hard one today. My next one's going to be a missing persons case, so I'll see you in the next video. Please subscribe and give this video a like.